Hey everyone, welcome back. This is GSA Schedules Federal Buyers Set Aside Training Part 3. In Part 3, we're going to talk about set-asides and how they're key to you winning GSA Schedules contracts. I'm Michelle Brown with FedBiz Exchange and FedBiz Now. I am the Regional VP for Federal Certifications and Training Programs. So let's get into it. Part 3. Set-asides are key to winning GSA federal contracts. And the reason this is so important is because the more you understand about set-asides, the more you will understand that you can win not just GSA schedule contracts, but you can also win other contracts as a small business. So what I'm teaching you is not just for GSA schedules. I mean, it's so important for GSA schedules because some of you thought that was the end all be all, and it can be, but you have so many other opportunities as a small business, period. But if you want to get the most out of your GSA schedules, you need to understand how set-asides work. So in Part 3, we will discuss 1. How federal agencies receive contracting dollars to spend with small businesses, not just with large companies, but specifically with small businesses. And number 2, how GSA and certifications are tools that are used for small business goals, meaning the federal agencies have to use your certification, your GSA schedule to meet their small business goals. Because remember, small business goals, the 23%, those are real numbers. That's not just something that we pulled out of the sky. They're in the federal regulations. So every agency has to contribute their portion of spending to that 23%. And number 3, how all federal agencies are required to set aside contracts just for you as a small business. And number 4, regulations that protect you, the small business, and how those regulations and protections help you win. And number 5, there are support folks that are there just to help you. And I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes, otherwise you guys wouldn't be out searching for people like our organization or people like me, but they are there. It's just that you have to know what they do and how to find them. And you need to know how much time to spend with them, and you need to know what to expect. It's like that in business in every arena. You know, if you know that some folks in certain industries don't do very well at something, then you don't look for them to do something better than what they do. So I will talk to you about, the different roles that you need to focus on and the ones that can help you and how they can help you. But don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't ever expect for any one entity, even if they are employed by the government, to help you, because they only see it from their perspective in their world. I see it from the business world. We all have to keep our jobs to eat. Not to say that they don't, but they have it a little bit easier than we do. That sounds a little harsh, but it's the truth. So, when I talk to you about how to work with a contracting officer, which is a federal buyer, I talk to you about that because you don't want to approach them in ways that are not helpful to you, because you don't want to irritate them, you don't want to be frustrated. So it's the same way with the specialists and the PCRs. PCRs are considered procurement center representatives. All they do all day long is protect you as a small business. They are supposed to protect your portion of the pie. They are also the easiest for you to communicate with. They're the safe zone, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So let's look at how the federal government contracting budget works. Like when these agencies get money, how does that work? So here's how it works. Here's what happens once the budget is put together. So once the budget is put together and you know all that discussion, we just had a few of those discussions last month, the executive branch will, of course, sign off, but you have the Congress and the Senate getting together to make decisions about what the budget is going to be. So all of these people that are deciding how much money is going to go where, that's neither here nor there, but the fact of the matter is that they do get the money. And that money, that $400 billion, goes to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of agencies that have contracting budgets. Now, remember, there is more money than this $400 billion. Remember, I talked about the disaster recovery and things like that. That money is on a different side, but some of you, a lot of you, will be able to get to some of that money as well whenever we have disasters, even though it's a bad time for the country or a city or a state. The fact of the matter is they still need your help. A lot of times that money goes through the states, but it's passed down from the federal government. So let's go ahead and talk about the contracting dollars that operate the entire federal government. So as an example, let's take the DOE, the Department of Energy. Last year, they got $30 billion. That's a lot of money, right? But they got $30 billion just to spend on contracts to do business with people like you. And let's look at the DOJ. The DOJ has a lot of agencies underneath them. They have the FBI, they have Bureau of Prisons, they have ATF. That is the Department of Justice. They have a lot of different baby agencies or departments under them, but they got $7.6 billion. Then you have HHS. HHS is a humongous department, and they got $1.1 trillion. Now, a lot of that, remember what I said, a lot of that money that HHS got, some of it goes to humanitarian causes and things, illness, disease, problems that we have in this country to do with health care. So, there's a lot of money put into HHS, but they also get a portion of that money, like I said before, to use for contracts, government contracts. So if HHS is an agency that you want to work with, you have huge opportunities with HHS. And then the last example that I use is the VA, the Veterans Administration. They don't have a lot of baby agencies under them. Their budget is structured such that they handle everything themselves pretty much, but they are one of the largest agencies in the country. So they are in a very important agency and they buy everything. But this is just 4 agencies that I'm talking about. There are hundreds, and when you do your research, you will see that there are hundreds. And most of them, you don't even realize that they have all of these baby departments underneath them that are spending dollars too, because the baby departments may be the awarding agencies, and I'll talk to you about that structure, but you need to know who you're dealing with when you're looking at working with an agency. So if you're dealing with the Department of Justice, they may be the funding agency, but the department that they're funding could be the ATF. Okay, so keep those things in mind. Look at it that way. Just make sure you understand who you're dealing with. Now, if you think about all of these agencies with all of this money to spend every single year, you should be thinking about every single one of those agencies is a possibility for you using your GSA schedules, because guess what? They set aside within the schedule. So they don't just set aside because of the certifications, the set-aside certifications. They also set aside because GSA, General Services Administration, has encouraged these federal agencies to set aside under the GSA schedule as well. So there are systems and people watching out for you with your schedule to make sure that these federal buyers are using the schedules to connect with you, to buy from you, to help meet your small business goals, or their small business goals, I should say, using you as the vendor that helps them to meet their small business goals. So this is how it looks. This is just kind of another example to show you, but you have hundreds of these agencies, but you have the Department of Interior, Department of Agriculture, you have Department of Defense, you have Department of Justice, you have Homeland Security, you have Health and Human Services. I put them in there again, but those are just examples of some of the major agencies that are responsible for helping to meet the 23% federal contracting dollar goals for small businesses. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how am I going to know which ones of these to go after, especially if there are hundreds? Because you're going to do your homework. Your homework and your research is step one. And that's in number 4. I know I'm making you go through a lot of other information first. You could jump to step 4 if you want to. Part 4 of GSA schedules in these videos. You could jump to the part 4 if you want to, but it helps you to understand what's going on. And I broke them down so that the videos so that they don't seem so overwhelming. You can jump to part 4 if you want to and start following the steps, but it makes a lot more sense and you'll be a lot more successful if you understand your power as a small business. But here's the 23%. So if you think of all these agencies in the green, hundreds and hundreds of them, 23% of all the money they're spending together and separately, by the way, is that 23%. That's how we got to that $95 billion last year. So $95 billion was spent with all small businesses combined last year. So let's talk about federal agency small business goals. This is your power. Every federal agency has small business goals for every single category, all of the certification categories: women, disadvantaged small business, 8A, veterans, service disabled veterans, and hub zones, and small businesses in general. So if you are a man, but you don't fall into one of the minority categories, that's okay. You still will have the ability to take advantage of the small business goals. And then each agency is required to report their results every single year. You could actually go to the small business website for each of those agencies and find out what their goals are. And if you don't see it, you could ask a small business specialist and call to talk to the small business specialist to find out, are they meeting their goals? Are they meeting their goals for women? Are they meeting their goals for veterans? Are they meeting their goals in general for small businesses? And then the SBA, along with other representatives, are required to work with those federal agencies to meet the goals. So the SBA gives them the report card. Now, I know people think that this stuff doesn't work. Everything has its flaws, but it's working. These are not fake small businesses getting all of this money. That's just the way it is. It's been this way for a long time. It's just gotten better over the years. And when we had our big crisis back in 2008, the economy falling after the war, with the economy falling and the housing crash, and we lost or were losing 800,000 jobs, it got better. The previous administration put in some more protections for small businesses to make sure that you're going to get paid within 7 to 14 days. If you're not paid timely within 30 days, then you have the right to demand that you can charge interest. And all the federal buyers know that. There are laws and rules to protect you, because if you're not getting paid, then you can't hire more people. This is all about you growing and hiring more people as a business. Small businesses, people say 60%, 70%. Small businesses create more than 80+% of the jobs in this country. It is not the large companies. It is small businesses. Whether you are bringing on 2 people every other year or 50 people, you are the key to the growth of the economy. So don't let other people tell you otherwise, because if you look at the statistics and you study the economy, nobody really understands how serious it is to ensure that small businesses are getting what they need to keep growing. Lots of people talk about small businesses, but only a few really mean what they say. So you have to learn on your own what's out there for you, and you need to go and get it because it's there. There are people doing it every single day. And then every federal agency with a contracting budget has a small business specialist. They actually have more than one. They have different small business specialists in different cities. It just depends on how big the agency is. But a small business specialist is there for you and you only. They are not there to protect the contracting officer or the buyer the way they act like sometimes. They're there to help you. So you need to know when you should talk to them or pick up the phone and call them. They're usually to help you understand why, for instance, something was set aside as a GSA schedule or not set aside as a GSA schedule. Or you can call them and ask them, how often are they using GSA schedules for certain types of products and services, or would they consider that, and what would they suggest that you do? Things like that. I will tell you though, the small business specialist, even though they work closely with the contracting officers, they will act like they don't, but they do. They are in the agency, within the agency, to help ensure that small businesses get in the door in that agency. They are supposed to understand everything that goes on. But I will tell you, don't expect a lot from them. There are certain things you can ask them for, like you can ask them about GSA schedule, how they're using it. Will they be using it more in the future? You can ask for a forecast report. You could even talk about setting up a meeting, maybe to visit the facility. But if that specialist does not seem helpful, don't waste your time. Find another one. There are lots of specialists. A lot of times they'll have anywhere from 2 to 10, but make sure that you're getting what you need. So set-asides connect to GSA and certifications. Let me explain to you how that works. So certifications are the SBA's way of working with all of the federal agencies to ensure that they can identify the small businesses that need to receive set-asides and opportunities. And set-asides mean exactly what I'm saying. They're taking a contract, whether it's for $4 million, $300,000, $50,000, or $1 million, and they're setting it aside just for a specific group of people, which would be a small business group. That could be a small business group of women, a small business group of veterans, or just a regular small business group. And then I just want to mention one thing, an important note. You need to know that set-asides are designed specifically to help you become a prime contractor, meaning so that you're not always having to go to large companies to ask for subcontracts. There's nothing wrong with subcontracts, but you can grow a lot faster and become a multi-million-dollar company the same way that I showed you about that one security guard company. You know, they are in the multi-millions of dollars, and there are lots of security guard companies like that. And they are small disadvantaged businesses. They are minority-owned, 8A, hub zone, and veteran-owned businesses and woman-owned businesses. So it is working. You just need to understand that you can be a prime. You don't always have to beg for or subcontract work or large primes that have their GSAs or that have other opportunities. You can also partner with other businesses when it comes to using your GSA schedule on contracts. So keep that in mind. But the idea is to help you grow so that you will create more jobs and so that you will become a bigger player. And it's also about leveling the playing field with federal contracts. And you don't have to deal with the big guys. You can move at your leisure to go after whatever you want without worrying about being crushed by a larger company. So this system ensures that regular small businesses, all of you, are treated equally, that you have a fair chance to make millions and to be a part of the bigger pictures. So this is how they do it. They've carved out a whole community just for you as a small business. And remember, these people work for you. They would not have jobs if it were not for you guys. The SBA, that's what it is, Small Business Administration. Do you really think that any of those people would exist if it were not for you guys? So don't ever let them make you feel like you're bothering them. Make them do their jobs. And I know because I have to do it. I love the SBA when it comes to their programs because I know that it gives opportunities, and I know the power of what they do, but I also know that they don't use their power sometimes the way that they should, at least the individual employees. So the contracting officers, they set aside contracts every single month, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of opportunities. But when you guys don't go and get them, it doesn't matter. Now, the contracting officers do not work for SBA. They are with the agency. The SBA is really like a monitor. They are like the monitor, making sure that everybody's playing nice and doing what they're supposed to do. And there are other entities within the federal government that can make sure that everybody's playing nice, like the Government Accountability Office, folks like that, the Inspector General. There are companies that when they are not treated fairly, and most of you don't want to do this or you shouldn't have to do this, they will get a lawyer and they win. So you need to pay attention and know what the regulations are. So how do contracts get set aside? Set aside contracts mean exactly what I said. A contracting officer or federal buyer can take a contract and literally set it aside for any group of small businesses. So by regulation, they have to abide by this law. You can't have a contracting officer that says, I'm not doing that. I'm not setting aside for any group. I'm just going to put it out there, the bid out there, and whoever gets it, gets it. Can't do that. And if he or she is caught doing that, they could lose their job. They could be challenged. And this is why you have to know the rules, because you have to know everybody. This is why we have regulations, unfortunately, because people don't play right. Everybody does not go by the rules the way they're supposed to. But when you know what you're supposed to know, nobody can treat you that way. And you can ask questions. Sometimes you need to ask them anonymously, or you need to go to a safe place to ask them, but you need to know what your rights are. When contracts are set aside, that means only specific groups can bid on those contracts. So if it's for women, then non-women owned businesses should not be bidding. Do they do it? Yes, they do. But you're supposed to be paying attention. And if someone wins that is not a woman, then you should ask the contracting officer or contact the SBA, or at least anonymously ask the question, how come this company won? They're not even a woman-owned business. Isn't this a set-aside for women? You need to pay attention to those things. And I am telling you, that contract will be snatched. Do not depend on the federal buyers to always do their homework, because they don't. They're busy. They have a lot on their plate, so you need to do your homework. This is huge because when they set aside contracts, it limits your competition. This is why I was telling you in the other previous videos, your competition for small business is minimal, because not a lot of you are bidding. And most of the time, your competition might be maybe 1 to 5. Maybe if you see 10, that's a lot. But even that is still small compared to what a lot of the full and open competition businesses have to do. The large companies, they have to beat out hundreds, sometimes hundreds of people. But you only have a small group that you're competing with, no matter what industry you're in. And then you could literally bid on a contract that has been set aside and have one other company, and you could beat them out. I've seen it happen. But if you're not bidding, you'll never know that. And then set-asides, you should know, are not optional. I kind of said this already. The federal buyers must set aside. Now, do they have to set aside exactly the way you want them to? No, but I will tell you, you can ask them. If you are a veteran-owned company or you're a small business and all you see is full and open competition opportunities and you want them to set aside a little more under your codes or codes that you know they're using, you could ask them. You could ask them, can you make some of these opportunities set aside for the future? Even though they may have a strategy of their own, don't assume that. It doesn't hurt to ask. All they can say is, no, not this time. But you have to ask them before the bid comes out. And you have to stay in their faces as your company. Show them that you can do what they need you to do, so that they know that there's competition out there. The way that they do that is through, sometimes they'll fill out the market to see if there are small businesses that can do a specific job. They will put out a sources sought, or what they call a market research survey. And so that's in fbo.gov. That's how you find that. But those are really important. I feel like those are golden nuggets. When you answer those, that tells them, oh my goodness, there are small businesses out there that can do this. The next opportunity, which let me just tell you, if they're putting out a sources sought, there's an opportunity coming. You need to watch that sources sought, because if you respond to it, the next thing you know, 30 days later, there's an opportunity coming. But if they don't see small businesses responding to it, they won't set it aside. It'll go under full and open competition. And your GSA schedule will not be able to compete. So you need to pay attention and you need to be responsive. How federal buyers are required to work with small businesses by law. Well, I kind of just told you some of that. That means they have to set aside, you know that. But also there are a few other things. So contracting officers, federal buyers, must consider small businesses for other types of or specific types of opportunities. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So the contracting officer must do market research. They're supposed to be out there looking for you. I will always be honest with you and tell you the truth. They're not always out there looking. So you have to make sure you're in the right place. This is why your codes have to match the buyer's codes. Your NAICS codes, your PSC codes, your keywords. You need to do your homework so that when they do look for you, you are right there with the other people that they either already found or with folks that they're looking for. But the way to do that is to see how they purchase. How are they buying? What codes are they using? What keywords are they using? And then the contracting officer, when they're looking for small businesses, they must consider historical data like award price and things like that, procurement activity, which is what I'm telling you. You know, if you have your information out there in the right place at the right time, then they'll be able to pull up information about maybe your pricing. And if you have a GSA schedule, which is what we're talking about, you are definitely going to be in the mix because they can already see your pricing, your historical data, and things like that. All they have to do is pull up your schedule. They can find your schedule. They can search your schedule, but they can tell if you have the right codes in there, and then they can easily find you. And then the contracting officer can select any group that they want to use to meet goals. Do they have to meet goals in all of the categories? Yes, they do. They have to meet women goals, veteran goals, 8A goals. So as you can see, they have a lot on their plates, but you can help them by making sure your documentation on your SAM file and your small business dynamic search is set up properly. So that when they go out there looking for you, that makes it so much easier for them. They do market research in your small business dynamic search, which comes from SAM. So if your stuff is right in SAM, then it'll transfer over to the small business dynamic search. They call it your small business profile. So contracting officers, based on what I just told you, when it comes to opportunities that are between $3,000 and $150,000, they must first consider small businesses only. This came about in the last or the previous administration where they were trying to create jobs quickly. They needed small businesses to get this money as quickly as they could. So the previous president decided that anything between $3,000 and $150,000 must be spent first with small businesses. So any solicitations that went out between $3,000 and $150,000 went to small businesses as a set aside. Okay? The larger companies could not bid on those opportunities unless small businesses from each of those categories. If the small businesses from any of those categories did not bid, then it went to a full and open competition. So remember that when you see something between $3,000 and $150,000, it must be a set aside. That rule has not changed. It must be a set aside. So if you see something between $3,000 and $150,000 and it is full and open competition, you should be calling a small business specialist or a procurement specialist and ask why. A procurement specialist, that is his or her job to make sure that these set-asides are where they're supposed to be. I would call a procurement specialist and ask him or her, tell them the situation, exactly the opportunity that you're looking at, and ask them, can they talk to the contracting officer about that being a set-aside? Why isn't it a set-aside? You should know that, and you should not allow things like that to pass. I rarely see it happen, but it does happen. Procurements exceeding 150,000 and one penny all the way up to 300,000 must go to certified groups first. So if you have a GSA schedule and you're a woman, or a GSA schedule in an 8A, or a GSA schedule in a veterans, then you are first priority for all opportunities between 150,001 and 300,000. That is huge. That limits your competition even more because most people don't know this. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention when you're looking at these forecast reports and these opportunities, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. You need to make sure that you're paying attention to the dollar amounts because that could limit competition for you, and you could easily win some of those if you are putting your bids out there. And then if small business certified groups don't respond, then the contracting officer can go to regular small businesses, which are uncertified small businesses. So the government was working very hard to make sure that small businesses were getting these dollars because they're thinking, why do we need to give $300,000 deals or less to larger companies? That's just greedy. They get 77% of the business. This money, 300,000 and down and lower, must go to small businesses, even if the small business is a $10 million company. They're not a $400 million company like the larger companies. So, and they're not even a $40 million company. So this is how the playing field is leveled. Not until the contracting officer has gone through 1, 2, and gotten nowhere can they go to number 3. The only way an opportunity that is over 150,000 to 300,000 can be bid in full and open competition is if these 2 small business categories did not respond, and the contracting officer has to start all over. And there lies the issue that I was speaking about earlier about how GSA is so quick. If they're using a GSA schedule and they have to change strategies, at least they could go from a certified small business group with a GSA schedule to a small business group with a GSA schedule, as opposed to having to go to full and open competition. But it cuts down the time, the procurement time, if they're using a GSA schedule. That's what they're looking for. So when can contracting officers set aside contracts? Well, they can set aside anytime they want to for any group, especially if they have not met their goals, but they can do it under certain circumstances. They can do it if they see 2 or more small businesses are going to possibly submit offers. How would they know that? Because they're seeing you bid all the time. They know that way, and they also know because they might put out a sources sought, like I mentioned earlier. You can find sources sought in FBO.gov and in FedConnect.com. And the market research is put out there under sources sought, or sometimes it's put out there as a market research document. And if you're a small business, you should respond to that. If 2 or more of you respond, then the contracting officer has a reasonable expectation that a small business will respond. They do their homework before they put it out there. Or they can go and look for you under market research. They can go under your small business profile, look for GSA or look for other certifications in your industry and decide if they're going to set aside. If they see 2 of you, again, this is why it's so important for you to have your buyer information correct, your NAICS codes, your PSC codes, and your keywords. If you don't have those correct and he goes out there to look to see if there are 2 or more of you, then he's not going to set aside because he or she doesn't believe that they will get a response. And someone might say, well, okay, so just because they don't see you, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, remember, he or she is a buyer. They need to spend that money. They have someone at an agency that actually needs what they're trying to buy from you right away. So it's like somebody coming in a store and saying, "Hey, I want to buy a television right now because I need to watch the news tonight. I need it right now." They need things immediately. And so because they have so much on their desk, even though it seems like sometimes it takes a long time, they're not slow in buying these things. If they need it when they need it, then you need to be there. You need to remember that. Everything is urgent. Even if it's not urgent, still consider it urgent. So, we need to give them no reason not to set aside. They don't need any excuses not to set aside. If you guys are not there, then they don't set aside. And then number two, the contracting officer or buyer can set aside contracts with only one if they want to. Now, I put that in there because it used to be that way, that it had to be two, but it's not that way anymore. If they have one person who bids on an opportunity, I've seen that happen before too. That person could get the opportunity. They're not going to send it back. What if you are the only one that bids, or you're the only one that says, "Hey, Mr. Buyer, I have a GSA schedule and I'm interested in that opportunity," and you do everything they tell you to do, which is bid, and you could get the opportunity. But they try to act as though they must have two. They don't have to have two. They changed that regulation, and now it says they can also do it with only one. And they can do it especially in categories for women-owned businesses under EDWOSB. That's substantially underrepresented categories. So for women-owned businesses, they also used to have that rule of two, but it is no longer in existence. So they can do it, but you need to let them know that you're out there. That's where your marketing comes in, when you're marketing off solicitation schedule, not during. The anticipated award amount. You cannot get a set-aside for more than $4 million at a time. You can have a couple of set-asides from different agencies or the same agency, but they have to be different awards. So if you're a regular product or service business, you can get up to $4 million as an award. If you are a manufacturing company, you can get up to $6 million. So they can set aside a contract for up to $4 million. I see it happening all the time. You just have to be there, and you just have to do your homework and know where to be so that you can get those opportunities. And then also the offer submitted by the small business must be fair and reasonable. With your GSA schedule, that's already taken care of. But let's say you're just using your set aside. Let's say the federal officer does not want to use the GSA schedule. He wants to go through a regular certification process. He just wants to bid, but he's going to make it a set aside. You still need to make sure that you're checking your pricing. Try to do some homework and make sure your pricing is fair and reasonable. However, as of a few years ago with the previous administration, they also added a caveat to that. They added a caveat basically saying that small businesses can be a little bit higher. Maybe not 15%, maybe not 10%, but you can add a 3%, 5% because they know that small businesses need to charge a little bit more. Large companies can underbid you all day long. That's not fair. So the previous administration, when we were going through those hard times, decided to put it in the regulations that contracting officers are allowed to accept pricing that is a little bit higher, provided you are competent, you can do the job, you have the capacity, and it's reasonable. But you can charge a little bit more, especially if you have to. They don't want you to fail. So keep that in mind. And just a quick note, in the case of the WSB program, make sure that you understand that your set-asides for WOSB and EDWOSB are based on the NAICS codes connected to the WOSB. A contracting officer cannot set aside without using those specific codes. And remember, sometimes they're not as knowledgeable. They're supposed to be, but they're not. If you are a woman-owned business and you have a contracting officer wanting to set aside for you, you need to make sure that the code he's using is a WOSB code. if you want him to get credit for setting aside in the woman-owned small business category. And with that said, thank you for joining me today. See you in part 4 of GSA Schedules Federal Buyers Training. Now, some of you may have already decided to go on to part 4. You can do that, but I hope that you'll listen to each one of these. But I'm looking forward to part 4 because that's where you actually get down to business. I'm Michelle Brown, and I'll look for my contact information and details, and I'll see you in the next video.